Tyageshwaram Ramakrishnam Saradam Matrarupinam Vivekanandam Acharyam Natva Vakshami Shuddhe Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacha Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaishajena Yopa Karottam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi. In our last class we discussed the sutra Sati Mule Tadvipako Jatyayur Bhoga. This, so to say, explains the results of karmashaya. Tadvipaka means the fruition of karmashaya, the fruition of our actions. How do our actions attain to fruition, give results? And this particular sutra is talking of a state at the time of departing from one body. So at the time of departing from one body, whichever karma is destined to have results, that will give results in the form of jati, ayu and bhoga. Jati is species, ayu is lifespan, and bhoga are life experiences. So whenever a soul is born, it will have this capital, so to say. It will be born in a specific jati, species, either as a man or a god or subhuman, whatever, depending on the karma. It will have a lifespan decided at the point of birth, and also a set of experiences, bhoga. All this will be determined at the time of birth by the karma that was accumulated at that point in time, which had a definite result like that. There is a condition in the first two words of the sutra called Sati Mule. That is, this fruition of karmashaya will happen. Like there will be birth with a certain lifespan and life experiences only if there are kleshas present. Sati Mule. Mula are the kleshas. We saw in the earlier sutra, klesha mulaha karmashaya. So Sati Mule, when the kleshas are present, only in the presence of the kleshas, this karma or karmashaya will give results at the time of death in the form of species, lifespan and life experiences. Now this is interesting in the sense, these Jivan Muktas, they have no birth because in them these kleshas are absent. So that is why this is important. The karmashaya has the potency to give results only in the presence of kleshas. If kleshas are not there, kleshas are, as we know, drives, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, attraction, attachment, hatred, fear. Only when these are there, then only this karmashaya will give rise to its results, not otherwise. If these are absent, karmashaya becomes impotent to give result. He gives the example of paddy. Paddy, only when husk is attached to it, then only that rice will sprout, so to say. If it is not attached to the husk, it will not sprout. He also gives another way of putting at it. Anyway, so this was the sutra that we discussed. So on one side, these kleshas, they of course obstruct or hamper our meditation, concentration. Then they cause accumulation of karmashaya, because only actions performed under the influence of kleshas gather karmashaya. So they are causes of karmashaya, and also they are causes for the fruition of karmashaya. These kleshas have these kind of roles, and that's why they are called kleshas, afflictions, pain-bearing afflictions. Because one is they obstruct or hamper our meditation, they cause accumulation of karmashayas, and they are responsible for the fruition of karmashaya. And that is the triple role, so to say, they have to play. As we saw in the earlier sutra, this karmashaya is drishta or adrishta janma vedaniya. It can be experienced either in this life or in the next life. So when it comes to karmashaya to be experienced in this life, in the seen life, then its fruition is only either one or two, in the sense it will either extend that person's ayur. We find in Puranas such examples. Through devotion to God or whatever grace of God, the lifespan increased of that person, or bhoga will be increased, or some dukkha will be reduced, like that. So it is not always giving three types of results called species, lifespan, and life experiences. That is the adrushta janma vedaniya, which is to be experienced in future life. But drishta janma vedaniya, it can give sometimes only one or two results, either ayur or bhoga. And sometimes even physical actions can contribute to this, in the sense that when we start this life, so to say, we are born with this capital, you can say. The species is defined, but ayur and bhoga are the capital given to us by our own previous actions. And in the present, whatever we are doing, that is also creating karmashaya, and if it is strong enough, it has the potential to change what we are born with. That's what is seen in some of the Puranas. And even physical actions might have the capacity, physical actions have the capacity to alter the lifespan and the experiences. If person leads very unhealthy lifestyle or takes very bad life decisions, then what can karma do? Karma is what he was born with, he or she was born with. But present life karma is also adding to it, adding to this karmashaya, and the result is we are experiencing. So that's the point. And then there is a lot of discussion about this, how karmashaya brings about its results. Whether one karma gives rise to one life, one karma gives rise to many lives, many karmas give rise to many lives, or many karmas give rise to one life. There are four options. Three are discarded. The Siddhanta accepted conclusion is, at the time of death, all the karmas, that many karmas, as a simultaneous effect, give rise to one life. So many karmas resulting in one life, that is the accepted conclusion, Siddhanta. Eka bhavika, it will generate one life. And there is a lot of discussion about this karma, whether it is going to give result in definite time, or it is going to give result in indefinite time, and all that. Depending on that, the Bhashyakara says that this whole business of karma is very varied and intricate, so to say. Anyway, so to say, for us, the takeaway, so to say, can be, we have to target these kleshas. These kleshas are the culprit. They cause karmashaya, they cause fruition, and we have to take another birth, and they obstruct our concentration. So we need to tackle these kleshas. That is the takeaway for us. That was the last sutra we discussed. And then the next sutra is more or less stating the same fact. Te lahada paritapa falaha punya punya hetatvat. Te means those jatyayur bhogaha, the results of karmashaya, they are either lahada falaha or paritapa falaha. That is, they give as a result either happiness or misery, depending on either caused by punya or apunya. It's kind of a given thing. So whichever karma had punya as its, or whichever karma generated punya, that will give rise to sukha, lahada, and which generated papa or which had papa associated with it will give rise to dukkha. So this kind of an extension of that earlier sutra. After this, Vyasa takes not Vyasa, the Patanjali, the Sutrakara, takes a different topic, more serious topic. And for spiritual aspirants, how this whole world, how they view this whole world. See, this world is viewed by many as a pleasure garden where we are come here to enjoy the sense pleasures and power and money and whatnot, and pursue it and all that. So, but how does a yogi view this world? And that's how the Sutrakara says, Patanjali, Parinama Tapa Samskara Dukkhaihi Gunavritti Virodhacha Sarvam Dukkhameva Vivekinaha. That is the next sutra, which is a slightly longer sutra. Parinama Tapa Samskara Dukkhaihi Gunavritti Virodhacha Sarvam Dukkhameva Vivekinaha. Sarvam Dukkhameva Vivekinaha is the main phrase. So, Vivekinaha means to a person who has viveka or discrimination. That is a person who is a spiritual aspirant. This sutra actually distinguishes spiritual aspirant from the rest of the humanity. So Vivekan, a person who has viveka, to such a person, Vivekinaha, sarvam, everything, all pursuits of pleasure, so to say, dukkham eva, they are misery only. That is the main body of or main contention of the sutra. So for a person who is discriminating all these pursuits of pleasure and hanging on to life or whatever, avoiding misery, whatever you call it, the life struggle you call it, it is dukkham eva. It is fraught with misery, associated with misery. And the reason is given in the earlier part of the sutra. It is parinama tapa samskara dukkhaihi. On account of or being associated with parinama dukkha, tapa dukkha, samskara dukkha. Three types of dukkhas. And gunavritti virodhat, on account of opposing nature of the gunas. For a person of discrimination, all activities, all pursuits are fraught with misery, dukkham. That is the sutra, layout of the sutra. And this does not mean that that person is always in misery. The viveki, or the person who is aspiring after spiritual illumination, sadhaka, he or she, it doesn't mean that he or she is in misery always. That doesn't mean. On the contrary, he or she is quite happy without having anything. That's the point. Every pursuit of possession, that person sees as fraught with misery because he or she is happy without any of those things. So it shouldn't give idea that that person is kind of depressed. That's not the idea. That person is quite cheerful, but knows that all other pursuits of this world, they are fraught with misery, and as such avoids them. That's the point. What are these three types of dukkhas that are mentioned? And what is this samskara, gunavritti virodha? That we'll say. The first dukkha it talks of is parinama dukkha. Now you see, parinama dukkha, we can translate it as the misery associated with ultimate consequences. Consequences. Parinama is consequence. So the ultimate consequence, there is misery attached in ultimate consequence. You know, that reminds us of quite a few verses from Gita. That verse, there is one descent, ladder of descent mentioned, and then there is sattvika sukha, and there is rajasa sukha, there is tamasa sukha. All kinds of sukhas are mentioned. Vishayendriya sanyogat yattadagre mritopamam pariname vishameva tat sukham rajasam smritam. That sukha which comes as a result of sense object enjoyment and appears as amrita, nectar in the beginning, but pariname vishameva. It is nothing but poison at the end. That is called rajasa sukha. So it reminds us of that verse from the Gita. The Bhashyakara explains what is this parinama dukkha. He says that when a person gets a desire, the mind becomes restless. That's actually a state of discomfort. To offset that, to overcome that state of discomfort, he or she runs or engages in satisfying that desire. A desire comes in the mind that makes the mind restless. Now that has to be satisfied. That seems to be the only way to overcome that restlessness. So that person takes to certain activities and to satisfy that desire. And when the mind attains quiescence, quietude, as a result of the gratification of the senses, that state of quietude is called pleasure. That's how Bhashyakara puts it. Pleasure is a state where mind becomes quiet as a result of the gratification of the senses. Before that, there was agitation in the mind, and the person thought that if I satisfy these senses, it will give me sukha. So that person engages in such activities which will bring that pleasurable experience, and the mind becomes calm. But the point is, the story doesn't stop here. That's the tragedy. In a very short time, the mind again wants more. The mind wants more and more and more. And the senses keep becoming keener and keener. This Bhashyakara is telling. The senses keep becoming keener and keener. So it wants more and more. And finally, a point is reached where that person breaches the Shastra Maryada or Loka Maryada. That's how we see in the world. Shastra Maryada is the boundary led by the scriptures. That's a boundary for our conduct led by the scriptures. And Loka Maryada is the sense of propriety in the society. That society has laid down for us how we should conduct ourselves. About that, these are the two boundaries, so to say. One is Shastra Maryada, the boundary led by the scriptures, and one other is Loka Maryada, the propriety, sense of propriety that is prevalent in the society. And this desire and pursuit and experience and more desire and more pursuit, it invariably drags that person to a point where he or she will breach these boundaries. Either that a person will perform ashastriya karma, such actions to satisfy desires which are not sanctioned by the scriptures or which are improper from social heights, in social heights. And that is what is called shipwreck. We call shipwreck, and that is the parinama dukkha. That is the misery associated with ultimate consequence. Unless this unbridled pursuit of worldly pleasure is checked, it invariably will lead to this disastrous consequences. And that's why I said that ladder of descent that we find in Bhagavad Gita, dhyayato vishayan pausaha sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodho vajayate. Like that, one after another, and then pranashyati. Smriti bhramshat pranashyati. Finally it is destruction, that is shipwreck. And we find it in the society. How people blinded by their whatever desires they have attain or hit this shipwreck. We find them. So this is the parinama dukkha. And yogi sees this. Viveki sees this and avoids getting into this trap. This Bhashyakara gives one example. He says a person is afraid of a scorpion bite and tries to escape that, and in the process gets bitten by a snake. In trying to avoid a scorpion bite, that person gets bitten by a snake. So like that, there was this discomfort in the mind, agitation in the mind caused by desires, and in order to get rid of it, that person's headlong dives, so to say, in the pursuit of worldly pleasures and then, so to say, gets bitten by a snake. So that is the parinama dukkha, and yogi is aware of it right at the beginning. Now that's why that person is called viveki. That person, before the first move, he or she is aware that the consequence will be disastrous. And as such, it is fraught with misery. This pursuit is fraught with misery. He or she doesn't engage in it. This is the main thing. Then there is tapa dukkha, anguish you can say, or actually it is the misery associated with acquisition of pleasurable objects or acquisition of pleasurable experience. Now this is not talking about the physical hardships that one undertakes in acquiring the objects that lead to pleasure. It's not talking about that, though that also involves a lot of suffering. But we are not talking of that. He is talking from a mainly scriptural point of view. When one wants to get something or get rid of something, one performs good or bad actions. Somebody is hurt, somebody is favored, and all these actions, they are done under the impulse of a klesha. So these are klishta karmas. To get something we are doing, and they will generate karmashaya, papa punya. So that is the tapa dukkha, the misery associated while acquiring the pleasure, the objects of pleasure or the pleasure itself. It will involve action. That action is invariably prompted by klesha. It's a klishta action. So whatever good or bad is done during that acquisition will generate karmashaya, which will have punya associated with it. That will lead to future birth. That's the point. So this punya associated with karmashaya, that will lead to future birth. So all the actions that one undertakes in pursuit of pleasure, because those are under the influence of a klesha, they will leave the karmashaya, they will generate karmashaya, which will have punya associated with it, because every action is fraught with some good and bad. So punya will be associated, and those will cause future birth. That is why this pursuit is fraught with misery, and that misery is called tapa dukkha. So that was the parinama dukkha, this is the tapa dukkha. The third dukkha is samskara dukkha. Samskara dukkha is the misery associated with samskaras or subliminal impression. When one experiences pleasure, the mind becomes peaceful for the time. But that experience of pleasure, it retains its mark on the mind in the form of vasana. That pleasurable experience, that sinks into the mind in the form of vasanas. That vasana will come back as a smriti, and that smriti will trigger karmashaya and perform actions and all that. That smriti will make us perform actions. And again we will seek more and more of that pleasure. Now Bhashyakara, while talking about parinama dukkha, he also says that as one pursues sense pleasures, this desire for pleasures keeps getting stronger and stronger. If today the pleasure is pursued with some force, with some intensity, next time it is pursued with a higher intensity. Why? Because that experience of first pleasure, it has sunk and strengthened, so to say, the vasana. That is coming as memory and that is coming as desire. So every experience strengthens the vasana, and that vasana will resurface with a additional energy. So every pleasurable experience is strengthening the vasana, that is the samskara dukkha. That is how samskara dukkha is explained. Every experience of pleasure will strengthen desire for that pleasure, vasana for that pleasure. And next time when that vasana comes, it will be with additional energy, with more stronger force it will come. And this is the samskara dukkha. So these are the three kinds of dukkhas associated with pursuit of worldly objects. And whatever is true of sukha, pursuit of sukha, is more or less true of the pursuit of dukkha also. Like out of dvesha, we want to get rid of something. There also all these things will come. Dvesha, pursuit of dvesha will also lead to a shipwreck. In the process we will accumulate punya. It will also strengthen this vasana of dvesha. So whether it is punya, whether it is sukha or dukkha, we are pursuing whether attraction or hatred, it is the same thing. Sarvam dukkham vivekina. For viveki, it is all dukkha only. Only one more reason remains, which is called gunavritti virodha, which we will see in our next class. So next Sunday there won't be this class because of this Japayagnya. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.